After seizing power in Afghanistan, the Taliban are now looking to form a government. The challenges that they face are immense. The economy is on the brink of collapse, and the United Nations is warning of an imminent food crisis. Many people are trying to leave the country, and those who remain, they face an uncertain future.
The wards are busy at Wazir Mohammed Akbar Khan Hospital. The facility is just down the road from Kabul airport. It treated many victims of last week's attacks there, which killed at least 170 people. Many of the nursing staff here are women. After the Taliban took power, they were afraid they would lose their jobs. When this situation first occurred, it was very difficult for us. We were worried about what would happen. But thankfully, there have been no problems regarding our work. When the Taliban took over, we stayed home for just one day. After that, the management contacted us and told us to get back to our duties. Without any fear or apprehension, we came back and resumed our work. In Kandahar, the Taliban have put on a show of military equipment left behind by the Americans. A kind of victory parade, lines of Humvees with Taliban fighters. A Black Hawk helicopter flying low over crowds. But the Islamists will now need to set about ruling the country. The lines outside banks back in Kabul are a hint at the rapidly declining economic situation. That and the soaring prices in the bazaars. Markets are not as crowded as they were during the Republic government, and people are staying in their homes in fear. Business is not so good. In the days since the rule of the Taliban arrived, we've actually had no government. We're waiting to see what will happen. What could happen first is more fighting. The Taliban's military victory in Afghanistan was swift and overwhelming, but it isn't complete. These militia from the Panjshir region north of Kabul have not succumbed, and they're vowing to resist. Should we reconcile with the Taliban? They should put their weapons down. War, occupation, force were never a solution for this country and never will be. If they want to enter Panjshir with force, that's a pipe dream they will take to their grave. The Taliban never succeeded in capturing Panjshir the last time they held power. They're massing forces in an attempt to take it this time. The region was the gateway used by the US when it overthrew the Taliban 20 years ago. It's a weak spot they can't ignore now.
All right, for more now, I'm joined by journalist Frans Marti. He's in Kabul for us. Good evening to you, Frans. What are we hearing about these fighters in the Panjshir region? Are they going to be able to hold their own against the Taliban?
That's difficult to say. There has been since yesterday, again, renewed fighting of these Taliban forces that amassed around Panjshir. It is hard to verify how the situation exactly looks like because at least telephone networks are sometimes down. I couldn't reach anyone in the Panjshir tonight. There have been reports that the Taliban managed to get on the passes from Baghlan, on the passes that lead to Panjshir. And what is the big difference to last time when Panjshir held out? Last time they had also areas in the northeast that were not Taliban controlled, supply lines. This time they're completely surrounded by Taliban. However, the terrain and the traditional resistance of the people in Panjshir will make it a hard fight for the Taliban.
And there are reports that the Taliban is already moving to establish a government. They could name their supreme authority as early as tomorrow. But that could be the easy part, right? Do they have people there who can govern, who are qualified to help provide the basic services for the 40 million people in Afghanistan?
What is the most likely outcome, and what the Taliban have to some extent already tried, is this: that they invite former government workers to resume their services, former civil servants. The Taliban seem to be aware that their own fighters, they lack certain skills. They can't run like services in the whole government. For example, in your report, we have seen in the hospital, the Taliban have kept the Minister of Health, of Public Health, from the former government and asked him to continue his service. They also ask like other civil servants to do the same. So what they are trying to do is to co-opt these people who have the necessary skills.
And of course, the world looking at Afghanistan today, now with U.S. military gone, what are you seeing in the capital, Kabul, out on the streets? Are you seeing as many women and girls in public spaces as you would have seen, let's say, 6 months ago?
I was today on the street. Scenes were pretty normal, but there are remarkably fewer women and girls on the street. Doesn't mean that there are none. And it should also be noted that so far the Taliban haven't banned women to the house as they have done like during their first regime. So far it is that like women are wary to go out because they don't know what might happen. This is, of course, a huge problem. But yeah, how this will exactly play out and what will exactly be announced remains still to be seen.
Okay, France Marty with the latest tonight from Kabul. France, as always, thank you. And joining me now is Mariam Safi, Executive Director of the Organization for Policy Research and Development Studies. It's a pro-democracy think tank in Kabul. She now works from Toronto, Canada. It's good to have you on the program. The Taliban, they say that they will soon present a new Afghan government, and they promise that it will be inclusive. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think at the present time, we don't have a clear definition from the Taliban as to what they think inclusive is. For Afghans, inclusivity, an inclusive government is one that would take into consideration the multifaceted aspects of Afghan society. A government that respects the rights of women, youth, minorities, and other vulnerable groups in our society. And third, an inclusive government would be one that would be willing to discuss with its people the type of governance structure that should come about. But what we're seeing now is that the Taliban are saying that they're going to be announcing a new government very shortly, and that the leader of the state will be their Amir al-Mu'mineen, or the commander of the faithful, and it will appoint a president or a prime minister thereafter to run the country. So from the structure that we're seeing right now, it does not seem inclusive. So that's why there's a question: how are they defining the term inclusivity? Because it's certainly not how the people of Afghanistan have defined inclusivity.
But do you think it's even conceivable that a woman can become a minister in a Taliban-run government? Would a woman even want to have that job?
Well, just today I read that Taliban officials have stated that a woman cannot be a minister, and that a woman who has worked with the United States cannot work in the government. So that's what I've heard as of today. And so, no, it seems they cannot. And in the past, in previous meetings, they had stated that a woman cannot become a president, that a woman cannot become a judge. But now, as the days are going on, you're starting to see more and more of those barriers and how the obscurity around what they meant in terms of women's rights per Sharia is now slowly coming to light.
Yeah, and it's the realities of this Taliban that you are talking about there that has countries around the world, reluctant, asking whether or not they should recognize that this Taliban government. I want you to take a listen to what the German foreign minister had to say about that today.
I personally believe there is no getting away from engaging in talks with the Taliban. On the one hand, because we have to find solutions to problems, like the continued operation of Kabul airport. Secondly, because we simply cannot afford any instability in Afghanistan. That would encourage terrorism and also have a massive impact on neighbouring countries.
Let me ask you, Ms. Safi, do you agree with that? Recognizing the Taliban rule, establishing diplomatic relationships, is that really the only way forward, the only way to prevent the Taliban from, once again, being terrorists?
The international community had long told the people of Afghanistan, in many of these meetings I have been in, and we've had these discussions, where they've said that we will always retain our leverage. on the Taliban to ensure that when they are developing their government and when they are running the country, if and when that were to take place, that is, of course, that these leverages would allow us to make sure that they remain committed to their promises of protecting citizens and their properties, ensuring that there are no persecutions of former government employees, NGOs, journalists, and others, and respecting women's rights, and more importantly, bringing about an inclusive government. Now, I think that needs to be maintained. I think what the international community needs to do now is to hit a balance where, on the one hand, the country is undergoing, and it will continue to undergo, a massive humanitarian crisis. So they have to be able to get aid onto the ground to be able to address that. While on the other hand, they have to maintain pressure on the Taliban to ensure that their own commitments and promises that they've been making to the people of Afghanistan are respected. Otherwise, the people of Afghanistan truly have no one to hold faith upon.
Well, the economy of Afghanistan, 80% of that economy is reliant on foreign aid of some sort. That's why U.S. President Biden says that the West still has enormous economic leverage over the Taliban. So how should that leverage be used moving forward?
Like, as I mentioned earlier, the Taliban have made commitments. They made these commitments as early as when they entered Kabul, that they're going to respect inclusivity, they're going to respect the rights of citizens and minorities, and that they're going to bring stability. They also said that this is now going to be a test for them to prove to the people of Afghanistan that they will bring that peace that they've long awaited for. Now, those commitments, they have to be held on, and to hold them upon those commitments, you have to have leverage. And so the international community should not let go of those leverage. Engaging is very important. Continuing to engage with the Taliban, I agree with the foreign minister of Germany, is important. But throwing in all that they have to be able to maintain that pressure would be catastrophic.
Mariam Safi with the Organization for Policy Research and Development Studies. We appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
The end of an era in Afghanistan and the start of an uncertain future as well. Let's discuss that with Naheed Farid. She was a member of the parliament in Afghanistan. She chaired the House Women's Affairs Commission, and she serves on the advisory board of the Afghanistan-U.S. Democratic Peace and Prosperity Council. Good to have you with us on DW. First, I want to ask, are you disappointed by President Biden's words?
Hello, and thank you for having me. Unfortunately, these words disappointed the whole nation of Afghanistan. You know, it took 20 years and millions and billions of dollars to take Afghanistan back from Taliban and giving Afghanistan back to Taliban. And, you know, when we think and we see that we have the whole 20 years of efforts and blood and treasure and the sacrifice for nothing. You can understand how the nation is feeling about that. You know, the Afghanistan security situation was not a secret to President Biden, was not a secret to the world, was not a secret to intelligence community. This information was publicly available in major outlets. That Afghanistan situation is not ready for withdrawal, is not ready for abandoning. And imagine what the people of Afghanistan are thinking, what Afghan national security forces are feeling these days, that the world abandoned them, the United States, United Nations, the European Union, the NATO allies, all of them just decided to leave this country in hand of Taliban. And Taliban is the same brutal group that have the same brutal system and suppressing the people of Afghanistan, especially women.
So
I just don't.
If I could jump in there, I'd like to ask, because, you know, President Biden has said the U.S. is still going to use its economic leverage to negotiate with the Taliban. Do you think the U.S. and its allies, as well, you mentioned the European Union, still have credibility in Afghanistan?
Actually, no one is listening to the people of Afghanistan and asking about the credibility of the world in their public perception. But the reality is that as we speak right now, the various fractions of Taliban are competing for power in their new government. They are locked out of the international banking system. They have no or little cash in hand. The most importantly, they do not have international recognition. And this is the time This is the time for the world, for the United States, for UN, for Germany, for IPU, for G7, G20, all these um, platforms to show strength in the face of the regime that most Afghans reject, that most Afghans fear, that most Afghans want to leave the country because of this regime. Afghans should be able to decide the future of their own country for themselves without any question. We have to understand this. They want to have close relation with your nation, with the US nation, with the old world, with their regional partners. And we need that kind of government. We don't need a government that is forced to rule the country.
Ms. Farid, if I can jump in there, the Taliban have said that they want to create now an inclusive government, that women could also be part of this government. What do you think of that? Do you believe that?
Taliban don't do what they say. Okay, they just beg for the legitimacy of the world, including United States. But I lost count of how many death threats I received, how many death threats my colleagues in the parliament received. They assassinated so many of the friends, colleagues who were activists, who were journalists, who were government officials. They continue searching houses. They continue beheading people in the public. If you think the situation in Afghanistan is bad now, and the world do not act quickly, if you give the regime the opportunity to consider a power without any oversight, without any intervention of United Nations, of United States, of EU, of Germany, the world will witness a regime of brutality, a regime of terror, of which we have not seen before, because they have a lot of equipment, they have so many things in their hands, and then they can act much more brutal than before.
Ms. Farid, just one more quick question from me. Given that situation that you just depicted for us, what is your hope for the future of the country?
As we are speaking, there is this resistance against Taliban in northern Afghanistan. As President Biden continues to say that Afghans are not willing to defend their values, there are resistance in the country that is against the Taliban regime, and they have allies among all tribes, groups from all over the country and even outside of the country. And that's my hope. The 30 million of Afghans, 15 millions of women, 70% of Afghans who are youth, they are my hope. We don't abandon our country like others did, and we will continue to fight for the values and freedom of Afghan people.
We'll have to leave it there. Naheed Farid, member of the Afghanistan Parliament, joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.